Are you scared of silence? Do you not like being alone with your own thoughts? Do you go back to season 1, episode 1 of The Office right after season 9 or season 7 if you're that kind of person? Well, in this video, I want to show you why embracing silence could be the key to getting your life back on track and improving your mental health. Right off the bat, I want to say that I have personal experience with this. I like to have my iPad running with something on a streaming service while I cook or clean or something else that's menial that doesn't require a lot of thought. A lot of people do this with music, and don't worry, I'm not trying to kill your vibe. I don't think it has the same problem. Music blends into the environment a lot more than a series or a movie. You don't have to concentrate to enjoy music, but the whole idea of a narrative is that you give it your attention, which is why you can think when listening to music, but you can't think when you have a series on in the background. This whole thing got really bad for me when I moved to Finland and was living alone for the first time in 8 years. I felt really lonely in this empty, quiet apartment. So I started having my iPad on, and before I knew it, whenever I wasn't at my desk working, I had something playing in the background. Yes, even in the shower. We live in a really noisy world. External noises like loud neighbors or loud living spaces, and internal noise like intrusive or negative thoughts. And actually being able to find silence is really hard, so the next best thing is to actually cover that noise with noise that you like. Something like The Office for the 100th time. But our brains need time to process all the information that we've gotten over the day. And if we don't give it that time, it just keeps getting overcrowded. I fell into this trap because I came from living with my partner and our dog to living alone. And it was quiet. Too quiet. It made me feel really lonely, and having voices from a TV show in the background made me feel a little better. But then it spiraled. I got depressed and then also didn't like the thoughts I was having, and suddenly I had to have something on all the time. One time I actually made the decision to shower without my iPad, and I got a physical response. I don't even know how to describe it, but it felt like fear in my stomach. It like cramped up. And that's when I knew I had to stop this. It was literally a coping mechanism, albeit probably one of the better coping mechanisms for depression, but still not good. And I think a lot of people are going through this as well. We have so much access to media right now that it's easy to constantly have something on and distract ourselves from the negative thoughts about our lives. But I think we're missing out by not embracing silence. Your brain needs time and silence to process what is going on in your life. And yeah, sometimes those thoughts are not going to be good, but the only way to get them to stop is by letting your brain process them. If you're constantly bombarding it with new information, it can never finish. So then, for example, when you go to bed and try to sleep, your brain finally gets the silence it needs, it starts working, and then you can't fall asleep. All because you're not giving your brain the silence it needs during the day. When you let distractions control your life, you miss out on getting to know yourself. It can be easy to see your brain as the enemy when dealing with mental health. And yeah, sometimes the brain is broken and it needs medication to function. But I feel like in many cases, the brain is just trying to figure everything out and trying to tell us what it needs to be happy. We're just not listening. For the longest time, I was ignoring all the signals my brain was giving me about my lack of happiness. All the while I was distracting myself with video games, media, and yeah, a lot of alcohol. But once I actually started listening to what my brain was trying to tell me, I recognized that I just wasn't getting any pleasure from the life that I was leading. And I had to completely change if I ever wanted to be happy. And yeah, it's definitely working. Ever wonder why you have your best ideas in the shower? Silence. Unless you're like me and take your iPad into the shower, but then you don't have any ideas in the shower. Yeah, running water is considered silence, but I'll get to that. It's just more proof that our brains work best when there's silence, when there's no other distractions, and we can just let it do what it does best. You probably heard the advice that if you're stuck on a problem, one way to find the solution is to just get up and go for a walk or do some menial task. Since your brain is still processing that information in the background while you are ideally listening to the nature while you're on your walk, or listening to the water flowing while you're doing your dishes, it can then give you the answer to the problem that you were having. But this wouldn't necessarily happen if you were focusing on a podcast while on the walk, or had The Office on while doing the dishes. Okay, this one is actually really fascinating, and I just learned about it during the research of this video. A study in 2013 found that silence boosted brain growth in mice. They were exposed to 2 hours of silence each day, and they developed new cells in their hippocampus, which is the region of the brain that is linked to memory, learning, and emotions. They did the experiment with white noise, ambient noise, Mozart, and silence. In the end, it was silence that showed the biggest increase in new neurons being formed in the brain. Isn't that crazy? So now that you know about all the benefits, how do you actually do it? It's going to be uncomfortable, but totally worth it. And you don't have to go cold turkey. Remember the mice. In the study, it showed that all stimuli except white noise increased the forming of new neurons. So if you're trying to wean off of having something on the entire time, try ambient noise or classical music, or maybe some other music without lyrics. But that wasn't part of the study, so don't quote me on that. When I'm working, I like to listen to jazz or lo-fi, and it works for me. For ambient noise, there's a bunch of websites and apps that let you control exactly what you're listening to. Sometimes I'll use one of these websites to make it sound like I'm working in a cafe without having to pay €6 for a latte. But you can also set it to a rainy evening with or without thunderstorms. There's a bunch of options out there. Or you can also go out into real nature without listening to a podcast or music. I know not everyone lives in beautiful Finland where nature is just a few steps away, but the silence of the forest is something really special. But even a park is considered ambient noise, so it doesn't have to be the forest. But no matter how you do it, the hard part is going to be dealing with your thoughts. And that's going to suck, especially if you've been distracting yourself from them for a long time. One good way to work through thoughts quickly is to journal. By getting them out of your head and onto paper, your brain sees them as crossed off and doesn't have to deal with it anymore. Plus, you should be doing your journaling in silence anyway, so it really is the best way to give your brain the time it needs to process everything. I actually fell back into the habit of having a series on in the background all the time after my recent breakup. I was doing so well for so long, but a big negative event like that can definitely pull you back in. I was just having a really hard time falling asleep because at night was when I was thinking about it. So I started taking my iPad to bed to quiet those thoughts, and before you know it, it was on all the time again. It wasn't until I started swimming regularly again and finally had these 3 hours a week that I was forced to be with my own thoughts that I was able to break that cycle again. It was so uncomfortable, but it is so important to sit with that uncomfortableness. If you're unhappy, there's a reason, and your brain might be telling you what that solution is, and yeah, that solution might be a hard pill to swallow, but it is possible. You just need to give your brain that time to process your life. Thanks for watching. Oh, and I turned 34 this week, so I guess it's time to make a wish.